So going on to our next question, what strategies have you found effective in addressing the stigma and judgment surrounding homelessness, addiction, and mental health within your communities?
I think that there are two key methods that I use that come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, more than two, but some that come to mind are stories and education and encouragement.
Mm.
I think I would, yeah, those are the three that I kind of land on. And so sharing stories allows me to provide context for people.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of misconceptions and a lot of assumptions. Even in the question, stigma and judgment, there's a lot of stigma. There's stigma, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned it earlier, you mentioned marginalization.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to something that I said, or that we both talked about earlier, this depersonalization that can often happen, this dehumanization. Well, stories work against that. And so when I meet someone and they ask what I do for work, and I tell them, I work in the downtown East Side, often their response is, "Oh, wow, good for you."
Mm-hmm.
Or, "Oh, wow, that must be really hard."
Mm-hmm.
Or, "Oh, wow, mad respect."
Mm.
Is I don't think anyone's actually ever said mad respect to me in response to that, but
Uh-huh.
that sort of response, that sort of meaning. And
Mm.
that's where I have an opportunity to come in and say, well, yeah, it is a difficult job.
Mm-hmm.
It is at times a difficult environment to be in. I can't deny that.
Mm-hmm.
But it is my community. And it is
Mm.
a beautiful community. And I love my community.
Mm-hmm.
And just using my own personal experience as a way to gently push back is the wrong word, but gently offer a different perspective
Mm-hmm.
than the one that they appear to be carrying. And
Mm.
I I'm very blessed. I come from a family who has always had everything that we've needed. And within that, there are within my kind of social circles and family context outside of my downtown East Side community, there occasionally comments are made that are very clearly misinformed. And
Mm.
that's where I can again step in and say, well, actually, context is important. And I can
Yeah.
provide that context.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say, you know, actually, it's not as simple as finding a job.
Mm.
I worked with someone who had a very intense physical injury, and from that developed their substance use disorder, and and now in trying to return to work, there are a lot of barriers that they are now faced with,
Mm.
and I feel like I'm not explaining it well. When I can bring a sense of personalization to a generalization, I find is that seems to be helpful for people,
Mm.
of saying, "Oh wow, really? That's cool," or "Oh wow, really? I wouldn't have imagined that was actually a real thing that people go through," or "Oh wow, I've never met anyone who's experienced that sort of thing." And fair enough. I don't fault anyone for not knowing what they don't know. I
Mm.
certainly don't know anything. or everything. Hopefully I know some things. I certainly don't know everything.
Mhm.
And so I don't fault people for what they don't know. Um,
Mm.
and that's where I have an opportunity to provide context, to bring context to these generalizations and these assumptions that are
Mm.
made. And that's also where education comes in. Of we live in a society that is very that places a lot of emphasis and respect on the scientific method and
Mm.
academia and empirical evidence and what can
Mm.
we prove and what have researchers found.
Mhm.
And actually, there's a lot of research out there about mental health, about addiction, about mental health care, and
Mhm.
the response and the approaches that we use. A lot of research out there about society and social barriers. And so when I can provide that element of context as well, of actually, there have been studies and hopefully I'm able to bring specific studies to the into
Mhm.
the conversation so it
Mhm.
doesn't sound like I'm just making things up, but I can say actually research has shown us that that's not quite the case.
Mm.
And from my learning and my knowledge, it's actually said this and it's
Mm.
actually said that and it's actually kind of challenged that common school of thought. um,
Mm.
and obviously not coming in as some expert because I'm not. But again, providing education for people because our you probably know more about this than I do in your counseling education, but we make assumptions, we make generalizations, and our brain does that to help save us time, help save us energy. We develop these cognitive shortcuts that
Mhm.
help us navigate life and experience and understand the world around us.
Mhm.
And of course, there's the flip side to that of when I start making assumptions about other people based on what I don't actually know of their experience,
Mm.
that's when I become really misinformed. And so if I see someone sitting on the sidewalk, smoking some kind of drug or engaging in some kind of behavior that I don't understand, my brain is going to try and make sense of it anyway. And
Mhm.
that's where my assumptions come in, and that's where my generalizations come in. And if I don't have any other source of information,
Mm.
if I don't have someone else saying, well, actually, research has shown, and actually, in my experience, this isn't the case. If I don't have anything like that speaking against my assumptions, I'm going to keep holding those assumptions. And that's going to keep perpetuating stigma. So, yeah, stories, education, and then also encouragement. I always try and encourage people to step outside of our self-referencing frames.
Mm.
Again, we all have these self-referencing frames. It's how we process what we're
Mhm.
seeing in the world because our experience is really the only experience that we personally have firsthand.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to, when I see something that I don't understand or that I don't know about, I'm going to use my experience to try and make sense of it.
Mhm.
And so we see that, for example, with addiction, um, I can control my alcohol intake.
Mm.
I don't have alcohol dependency, so why does someone else?
Mhm.
I can find a job and keep a job and find myself housing
Mm.
and show up to work. So
Mhm.
why can't someone else? I
Mhm.
don't use cocaine. I don't use meth. I don't use heroin.
Mhm.
So why can't someone else? Physical exercise and diet and social activities work for me in taking care of my mental health. I'm fine by doing those things. I don't need medication. I don't need counseling. I don't self harm. I don't, engage in risk taking behaviors. So why do people just need diet, exercise, and friends?
Mm.
And we have, and that's where our self-referencing framework
Mhm.
really does other people a disservice and really does ourselves a disservice because we lack the nuance and the contextualization. And so I always encourage people and myself, let's step outside our experience and our frame of reference for a moment,
Mm.
and let's be curious.
Mm.
Um, let's be curious about what might be some of the reasons. What might there be that we don't see?
Mm.
Again, not trying to make assumptions about people's experiences,
Mhm.
but opening ourselves up and opening up our minds to the idea that diversity and us all being different means not just characteristically, not just trait wise, but actually means that the way that we just opening up our minds or ourselves to the idea that there's always more to the story.
Mhm.
You obviously have education and experience in this area as well from
Mhm.
a slightly different angle. But
Yeah.
I is anything that I'm saying kind of landing with your
Everything landed.
thing or
Everything landed deeply. I'm actually, I would love to take notes right now from you. If anything, I'm going to re-listen to this entire interview because I'm just in shock with how you phrase things so beautifully with the sense of encouragement for people to really sit with all the things that they don't know and really give that space. And it's true, we don't know what we don't know until it becomes what we know, usually in a setting that is very confronting. And I really am seeing all these like threads come together in terms of how you talk about how stories work against depersonalization and just the power that stories hold in reconstructing narratives. Because we're also talking and we're also giving space to the narratives that haven't been given um, much weight or they've been pushed aside. Um, and and it's a really difficult thing to sit with and to talk about because at the end of the day, we're asking people to hold space for very difficult dialogue and conversations, and and how we approach that or how it can be as effective as possible is really to be willing to listen and to be willing to be open and to be willing to give the possibility of change a chance. Because when we hear these stories and we really respect that and we honor that, um, then we're also understanding that if we were put in the shoes of somebody that went through all that they went through, then where they are now would make sense. And in that making sense, there is also this second hand form of anger because
Mhm.
many of the circumstances that brought a person to where they are now um, could be because of just forms of oppression
Mhm.
or systems that are way bigger than us that work in the favor of others and and not at all for the rest. So yeah, I really appreciate you talking to that and also giving very concrete ways for people to go about this and to really open up the conversation and uh, make things um, possible for people to see things differently.
Mhm. No, I love what you said, and it's so true. We hold these narratives, and a lot of the time we don't even realize that we're holding them. And,
Mhm.
we may have never heard a different narrative. And
Mhm.
I loved what you said about the possibility of giving change a chance. I love that. Um,
Mhm.
Definitely gonna write that down. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, but I think, yeah, I think stories open open the door, as cheesy
Mm.
as it may sound. I think stories
Mhm.
really open the door because stories are what engage people, right? If
Mhm.
I start by spouting off facts to someone who's just made kind of an ignorant comment about some
Mhm.
sort of social issue, if I just start spouting off facts, you know, they might disengage. There's an air of pretentiousness there,
Mhm.
on my part. That's not
Mhm.
necessarily a very helpful approach. But if I start with a story, if I say, "Hey, this is what I've seen,
Yeah.
and these are people that I care so deeply about.
Mm.
These are names and faces and lives to me. This is not a group of, you know, um, people will say homeless people or people experiencing homelessness. Well, yes, that's okay.
Mhm.
That is a demographic that exists
Mhm.
within society,
Mhm.
but I don't know people experiencing homelessness. I know people,
Mm.
and I know names and faces and their
Mm.
stories.
Mm.
And I know Tanya, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I know people.
Mhm.
And yeah, and so stories just kind of engage others who have maybe, yeah, made a bit of an ignorant comment or have kind of revealed an unconscious bias or an assumption that they're making that maybe isn't totally fair. And then that's where the education piece can take place.
Yeah.
Beyond this anecdotal story that I can give you, I can say, and actually there are things to back this up.
Yeah.
And then comes the encouragement
Mm.
of I never want anyone to walk away from a conversation with me
Mm.
feeling ashamed.
Mm. Mhm.
There is so much that each of us don't know.
Mm.
And like we both said, we don't know what we don't know.
Mhm.
And there have been times where I have really needed to learn something and to catch
Mhm.
up to speed on an issue that I'm just ignorant about and that I've all these unconscious
Mhm.
and automatic biases and assumptions about. And people have had conversations with me where they have, berated me and really criticized me.
Mm.
And I've had conversations where people have really invited me invited me to think about things differently and invited me into
Mm.
conversation.
Mhm.
And I can tell you, both of those types of conversations have had major impacts on me, but the conversations that were the most empowering and that really
Mm.
changed my perspective, not out of a sense of guilt,
Mm.
but out of a sense of realization and clarity.
Yeah.
The conversations that did that were the conversations that were invitational and
Mm.
encouraging, and that
Mhm.
didn't focus on reprimand, but focused, even if I, deserved it,
Yeah.
but that really focused on, hey, let me show you something different,
Mhm.
and let me encourage you to keep looking at these different things.
Mm.
And I invite you to think about it this way instead
Mhm. Mhm.
and see where that goes. And I'm
Yeah.
here to support.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think what you just shared definitely highlights the importance of creating safety within these conversations and how safety allows us to open up in ways where if we were feeling threatened in a conversation, we are more likely to hold on to our beliefs and what we've known for so long because that provides us some sense of safety because they're concrete and they're what we've known and they're essentially what has led us to where we are now. So the possibility of being changed isn't really given a chance because there
For
is that
sure.
lack of safety. But that being said, like I totally understand like whether a lesson is a lesson at the end of the day, and um, you know, granted, when we do feel a little threatened, our nervous system is also just more activated and dysregulated. So to be able to get to a place where we can actually integrate what we're learning, that will eventually take some time. Yeah, that'll definitely take some time to get to that place.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that was so well said. The moment that people start feeling defensive,
Mm,
I think is the moment that they disengage.
mm,
And
mm-hmm.
so I could respond to their judgment with judgment of my own,
Mm-hmm.
but then they'll likely become defensive and they'll likely disengage.
Mm,
And it's through engagement that, like you say, there's the possibility to give change a chance.
mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so I don't ever want, goes back to that piece of I don't ever want anyone to walk away from a conversation with me feeling like they've been shamed
Yeah,
by me, because
yeah,
that's not my place.
yeah.
And that's a really horrible experience for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that shame, that sense of judgment that they are experiencing from me, like you say, the nervous system kicks in, the nervous system goes into high alert of, her words, whether she means them or not, are presenting a threat to me. And so,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, I'm going to hold on to what I know, to what is safe for me. And
Mm-hmm.
that presents as defensiveness and then
Mm-hmm.
disengagement. And yeah, that's not how understanding is gonna happen.
Yeah,
It's not gonna happen through disengagement. So yeah,
yeah.
thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, no, it is. It's so interesting. And also another thing that I'd love to add is that this is also showing me how important it is to also give ourselves grace, um,
Mm,
especially when we see how our way of thinking, or perhaps the way we perceived um, a certain community, is actually very hurtful and harmful. And how perhaps what we've learned growing up is also the result of the very same systems that have brought people into marginalization, um, is also understanding that shame is it's hard for something beautiful to grow from shame, because shame is holds a lot of judgment towards ourselves too. And albeit, these are very big feelings to sit with and to hold space for. Um, I think there is also a lot of beautiful things that can come when we give ourselves grace in that, okay, like this is what I thought about before, and I'm being invited to think about things differently. And I feel a bit sad that I thought this way, and now I can choose differently, and now I can educate myself better. There's like this, this give and take with our feelings of like honoring um, that sense of shame because of the hurt, but also re-narrating it to yourself and saying, I can I can be better or I can do better
And I can do differently.
and I can do
Yeah.
differently. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, and as we come to a close of our conversation today, I am curious, and this is sort of hand in hand with our previous question, but what changes would you like to see in how society perceives and accommodates individuals with disabilities, both visible and invisible?
So many ways. I Yeah, this definitely connects back to some of what I've said already. I would love to see a greater societal and systemic awareness of our assumptions, of our biases, of the privilege and power dynamics that are still very much at play in our
Mm,
world.
mhm,
In many ways, we've come very far from where we've been, and we
mm,
also have a long way yet to go. And that's
mm,
an uncomfortable truth that we have to sit with. And
mhm,
yeah, I would love to see a day where people are given the benefit of the doubt, where
mm,
we are curious rather than condescending of
mm,
other people's experiences and behaviors, where we are aware that there's always more to the story. There
mm,
are always things that we don't see, that we don't know about. And yeah, that ability to step outside of out of our self-referencing framework. And it's called visible and invisible disabilities are each so unique in and of
mm,
themselves, but
mhm,
also intertwined. And I mean, I live with a visible and invisible disability, and
mhm,
some what that means is sometimes I look fine. Other times I very much do not look fine. Um,
mhm,
and yet there's a lot more going on than people necessarily see with
mm,
with their eyes. And sometimes everything is very much they can see with their eyes. But what I've found is the times that I have, and again, I can really only speak from my experience, but the times where I've
yeah,
felt most supported
mhm,
were the times when people didn't ask, what is happening? What's wrong with you?
mm,
What's going on? Why is your body doing this alarming thing that I can see? But when they've asked, is there a way that I can help?
mm,
If not, then I'm just going to be here with you.
yeah,
And you can tell me what you want to, and you
mhm,
don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. So
mm,
I think it comes down to selflessness.
yeah,
Selflessness. I'm going to make myself open and available and safe
mm,
for individuals one on one in the moment. And on a broader level, I'm going to examine my own assumptions.
mm,
I'm going to remember that there's there's more than meets the eye.
mhm, yeah,
To pull up a cheesy quote.
yeah,
Um, and I think from that is where systemic change will happen.
mm, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that you put that very beautifully. And I wish and I hope for the same many things that you just described as that ability to be selfless and and generous in our time for others.
I feel like I could talk about this all day long with you. Like, there are so many questions that I want to ask you and be like, tell me your thoughts and let's talk for 4 hours. But unfortunately, we can't. And that would
Mhm.
probably be kind of boring for people. But yeah, no,
Mhm.
this is good stuff. So
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
thank you for
Yeah.
having these conversations.
Mhm.
They're so important.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I'm honestly every time in every um interview that I've hosted, I'm just in awe. Like there's this time where I'm just like wow, or I'm in awe, or I'm shocked, or I'm amazed, or and it really is because I see people who are just so passionate about what they do, and they're
Mhm.
working towards a future in which everybody is treated as a human being, deserving of love and care and support. Um, and that moves me, and that moves me so much because I'm like, wow, what a beautiful, equitable, safe future that all these people are creating and breathing life into, and what a gift it is to just hear it and to hear all these stories. So I really genuinely appreciate you coming here and sharing yours, and some of the ones that have also impacted you. Um, and I feel like both of us are in such a reflective state right now.
Yeah. 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 And there's always so much more to say. I'll probably
Mhm.
walk away from this conversation
Mhm.
kicking myself for not mentioning something or
Mm. Mhm.
I'll probably think of some I don't know, I'll probably think of something. Be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I should have said that. That would have made me sound really smart," or something, but no, it's like you say, at the end of the day, we're all human,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it's messy, and it's beautiful,
Mhm.
and and we just are.
Yeah. Yeah. And whatever comes up in the moment is also what needed to take up space. So
Mhm.
so yeah, I well before we end, is there any last words that you'd like to share?
I think just thank you again
Mhm.
for having these kinds of conversations and for holding space for them to happen, and
Mm.
just kind of a broad encouragement to anyone who hears this to have these conversations in their own lives.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I I was about to say we're all in this together, and it made me think of High School Musical, and I was like, "Girl, don't go there,"
Of
but I
course.
did. But yeah, we really are
Mhm.
all in this together, and so
Mhm.
have these conversations. They're
Mhm.
so important and they're so needed.
Yeah.
And connect.
Yeah. Connect.
Yep. Let's
Mm.
connect to each other.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Gemma, for connecting with me today, and for everybody who is tuning in. I really appreciate your time and your energy, and for showing up today.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by the Vancouver Adapted Music Society. Since 1988, VAMS has been supporting and promoting musicians with disabilities in Metro Vancouver through various programs, including music lessons, recording projects, and live performance opportunities. To learn more about us, visit our website at www.vams.org, at VAMS Society on Instagram, the Vancouver Adapted Music Society on Facebook, or email us at info@vams.org. Thanks for listening.